The end of 2025 saw the release of a brand new Robin Hood television show starring Jack Patton in the title role and Sean Bean as the Sheriff of Nottingham. All 10 episodes of that first season are now available to stream on MGM Plus, which can also be found through Amazon Prime. What you're about to hear is a group of Robin Hood fans and scholars from around the world representing 5 different time zones, giving their thoughts and feelings about the first season of this show, as well as their hopes for potential future seasons. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Do we need to do some introductions? Well, I think all of you know me, Thaddeus, run the Into the Greenwood podcast. Happy to see you all here. Happy to hear other people's thoughts about this show now that the first season has wrapped up.
I'm Emily. I've been around on the podcast and on the Discord. And yeah, this show has been a ride for sure. So it'll be good to talk about it.
I'm Alex. I've been around on the Discord. I think I showed up to a couple of book club meets, but yeah, this an odd one to think about this show. I feel like, yeah, I mean we'll get into it. Sorry.
And I'm Marcia. I haven't been here before. I was just thought it would be nice to meet other people and talk about it.
Hey, there's Will. I was just about to send you a message, Will, to make sure you didn't forget.
Good morning.
Morning for you. Marcia, where are you calling in from?
From the Netherlands.
All right. So we've got at least four time zones represented. Yes, Emily's calling in from the US. Alex and I are in the UK, and Will is in Australia. So we're going to discuss just informal, no set questions, what our general thoughts were about season 1 of the MGM Plus Robin Hood show from the end of 2025, what we might think about a season 2, and just generally get our takes. I'd like to kind of start the ball rolling with my single one big take that I have for this show. And it's that the writers, John Glenn, not the astronaut, and Jonathan English, had a mediocre Robin Hood movie in them that then got expanded into a 10-episode series.
That feels really accurate.
Jonathan English, his kind of big hit before was the movie Ironclad. So I kind of feel like this has got a little bit of a Ironclad, but as a television show vibes.
I do remember someone saying, sort of, I think when we were around episode 5, like, I'm sure there's a good 90-minute movie in here. And I do feel now that it's all out, I feel like you could sort of get all 10 episodes and make a pretty all right 90-minute film. But yeah, it feels rude to call it dead space, but there's a lot of it feels like.
I remember thinking halfway episode 9, like in terms of Robin of Sherwood, which is my main series. We haven't even finished episode 1.
Yeah,
in setting up the storyline.
So watching this show has inspired Emily there to watch Robin of Sherwood for the first time. How far in are you now, Emily?
Oh, I think how far am I think 4 episodes in. I think it's not that I haven't been interested in Robin of Sherwood up until this point. It's just that I've been saving it because I know it's good. And after finishing MGM, I was really ready for a good Robin Hood show. And it has not disappointed me. It's been a lot of fun to watch it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to compare the two in a lot of ways. One, they're both shows that kind of move slowly in that they're not like super high-paced kind of shows, but a lot more happens with Robin of Sherwood. There's still like every episode or 2 episodes, if it's a 2-parter, is still a self-contained story arc. Whereas the new show, it just kind of feels like it's plodding along as part of one long rambling story. And they both incorporate these Saxon pagan elements in there as well. Of the two, I think Robin of Sherwood handles that a lot better, and mostly because it's more meaningful. It's like from a historical perspective, it's equally nonsense on both sides, but it matters to the plot and the characters with Robin of Sherwood, where it felt extremely incidental with the new show to me.
Well, they kind of forgot about it for a stretch of 4 episodes in the latter half. I was they sort of left it behind. I was like, okay, we haven't mentioned any of that lot in a hot minute. And then it got to I think the final episode of the second last episode. And it's like, oh, yeah, we're still doing that. Good to know. I thought we weren't.
Mm. I sort of thought Goddard was going to get up and like join the fight because they have her not just around, like you said, like they had a shot of her being like, "Oh, we have to put Goddard in real quick because it's the finale," but they had her actually responding to what was going on. So I thought that there was going to be a bit more of a resolution to what was being set up with Rob as being like a reincarnation of Adric, but they just sort of had, remember this? Like literally, like here is
Mhm.
the story of Adric that I told you in the first episode, and then that's it.
Yeah.
It didn't influence the story at all. It would have been exactly the same series if there had been no Godda or Adric.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas it's impossible to divorce Robin of Sherwood with the whole son of Herne thing.
Yeah.
Well,
Hey,
I don't
Mike,
think
thanks
it's
for joining
great.
us. We got another time zone in. Yeah.
Morning.
I'm a little late.
I was always thinking during the season that it seems like a really tight 6 episode season stretched out to 10. And then even though I think it's a little unfair to compare any Robin Hood show to each other in pure time capacities alone. Robin of Sherwood, that first season, is 6 episodes and it crams in a lot more, but in a way where you don't necessarily feel like it's overstuffed. Like there is a whole lore that you have to get your head around, which is this Herne thing, which is brand new, but it's so naturalistically incorporated into the show, you don't really think twice about it. Whereas, like we said in the first time we talked about this show, there's that massive hurdle you have to clear, which is Godda, Adric, Christianity, Saxons, but then the black hole in the middle of the season where they just don't incorporate it at all. So there's a lot that we're being asked to accept without then needing to have accepted it as it turns out, because it's just
Right.
not necessary for the final tying things up in the last run.
Yeah.
Well, it does the thing of where when they're using those elements, it almost feels like they set up Rob as sort of, well, he's the chosen one, but not in those words. And they're like, well, he's the most special boy in all the land. And then he proceeds to be unhappy for 10 episodes. And then they sort of slowly sort of stop using the sort of pagan terms, but they still have Friar Tuck be like, but Rob, you're special. And we're just kind of like, why do you think that, man? What's going on? What's he done? Just sort of glowered for a bit in the woods.
He was really good at shooting some people with the bow. That's about all I got, you know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, aside from the archery, it did feel a bit like the role of Robin Hood in this TV show was played by Friar Tuck. Even it felt a bit like just sort of talking about sort of how much time it takes to get to things. Thinking of like the 2018 Robin Hood movie and the 2010 Robin Hood movie, both of those sort of end with them going into the forest and be like, and this is where the adventure starts. That's kind of how like when the final episode has one off, sort of jump ahead, one offhand line of, hey, what if we gave this money to poor people? Would that be crazy? Would that be madness? It sort of felt like, oh, we're doing the Robin Hood thing literally at the final hour. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to set that up and then just pull it back. It's a 1 step forward, 15 steps back sort of thing. Because we have that in episode 4 where Tuck's saying, I'm happy to help organize this attack on the bishop, but give my share of it to the poor. And then the next episode, they literally bury the money.
Mm-hmm.
So it never goes anywhere. So we get that yeah, that I guess you could call it a payoff in the last episode where it's saying we've got all this money still, what do we do with it? We'll give it to the poor, but then they scatter. And so even when they finally get to the point where they're starting to become altruistic finally after nearly 10 hours of material, we then both don't see it and it's not ongoing. So
Yeah.
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, having the primary motivations just be revenge for the vast majority of the show got tiresome, honestly. I was on board when we discussed the initial first two episodes with the idea of like, oh, Rob has been very terribly aggrieved and wronged, and he's this angry young man, and he has to overcome these things. But okay, this is going to be his narrative arc that we get to see him go through, and they tee up things with like, him talking to Ralph about how, oh, my father taught me to never draw my bow in anger, and then the next thing he does is just shoot a bunch of guys. And there was the thing with Little John when he got introduced about how he had been forced to kill his own father and like how murder changes a man's soul and what a dark thing it is.
Murder is a wretched thing. Haunts you like a shadow.
And then they just go and kill a bunch more guys. Like, and it's fine. Tuck is the only one who seems to be concerned about this at all. And so where was the story supposed to go, and then where it did go, where what they set up, and then again just violent, angry revenge stuff for 9 more episodes.
Yeah, it sort of went exactly where they let it go, like exactly where it could go with that being it. Because again, there's that sort of void in the middle of the season where there's nothing really for anyone to do. Like there's literally Marion wandering around being bored for a whole episode. And I get the point is that she is bored and because this isn't the life she wants. But still, as far as an episode of TV goes, we're watching her be bored. But you have a show about someone wanting revenge against people that he is physically removed from, and he can't go up to them because of the physical danger. And so what we have then is a episode after episode where he's avoiding people because of this revenge story, and because there's no balance of that with any again altruism or charity elements or even just other secondary stories to go off because revenge is the story, then we're just sort of waiting for the revenge to happen, but it can't happen because of the danger. So it's just this awkward place where the show went exactly where they set it up to go, but the problem is it didn't go very far because of the limitations they themselves set.
Yeah, it's also the only story, so if it gets resolved, they have nothing else to show us.
Yeah, case in point, they all disappear at the end. It's like we hit them bigger than they hit us, and then that's it.
I've heard people compare it to Game of Thrones, and I think the main plot, as you are saying, is about the relationship between Robin and the sheriff Huntingdon, the queen, and the merry men are just sort of a background because they have to be there because it's Robin Hood. But that's, for me, essentially what is missing, that it isn't about the camaraderie or the relationships between the merry men. There's not that together feel or that intimate feel. It's just like a big plot, but it leaves it empty on the kind of where the heart is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like I said before, it's very hard not to compare the show to Robin of Sherwood all the time. And one of my favorite things about Robin of Sherwood is how much emphasis they put on the camaraderie between the merry men, how much it feels like people enjoying one another's company while living together in the woods. And you get a lot of scenes with them doing that. And there was not none of that in this show, but there sure wasn't a lot, not for the amount of screen time that there was.
Mhm.
And not enough to really develop most of the characters.
I was really surprised when I can't remember what episode it was. They decide to all split up. They're going to split up and go their separate ways. And then they end up back together and decide, hey, actually, this makes sense. We should do this. And then, end of the season, actually we're going away. We're all gonna go our separate ways again. We're gonna just repeat that. And I guess we can assume in season two they'll have to get the gang back together again if they want to have a story. And I just think it's really odd that they chose to do that twice.
Yeah, episode 7 of next season is going to be reunited. It's going to take a very long time for them to get back together.
I do predict it would take at least an episode or two. And I have a hard time, honestly, imagining what the impetus could be to bring most of them back together. I mean, while they didn't seem to dislike each other, they also just kind of seemed to be together a little bit by happenstance. And they're spread so far apart with some of them in London and Will Scarlet, oh right, he's in this show too, going off to Rome. And what was Rob and Marion even doing? I forget.
I think they were just bunkering down until Henry comes because
Like
there's the
in Sherwood?
inevitability. I don't think so because he gets his pardon from Eleanor, but Eleanor's basically saying this is useless because Henry's going to come and then we're in trouble. And Marion saying, let's just have this time for now. So I'm assuming they're just going to be free in London and then Henry's going to come and kick down doors trying to find him. But very unclear what they mean by we have this time because it is just with that dark cloud that is their inevitable death at the hands of Henry as far as Eleanor's concerned.
If they need help with Henry, they can just recruit 100 odd members of the Merry Men off screen again, right? Like that's probably going to work again, right? Don't know how they did it the first time, but they nailed it. They had a whole camp together with dozens of people.
So to cut the show a little bit of slack and a little credit, and one of the ways in which I think we can give them a little bit of a leeway as far as the altruism angle is my understanding is that all of those other outlaws in the camp were people whose farms and homes were burned by that one lord. And so they had all kind of taken them all in, and then that served as the basis of their militia force as it was.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I maybe it's because of the gap between weeks, so that didn't quite track for me, or I missed that. But
It wasn't really well explained. This is me doing a little bit of the lifting for them.
It was a weird issue with the show. Or there are things I liked about the show. I don't mean to be wholly negative. I apologize, but it was the weird thing of it didn't quite get why if they were displaced they went with Rob, because I mean there's this whole statement from Friar Tuck where he says something to the extent of they see a leader in you or they see a good man or something or other, and it's like he's not really done all that much except be sad and vengeful. That he's not really done anything that would inspire these people to go, well, I know who we need to side with, the angriest man in Sherwood.
He hasn't even given them the rousing speech while standing atop a big rock or tree branch like Errol Flynn or Kevin Costner.
And it's very difficult because when there is the rousing speech in episode 7, there's a scene immediately after where John says to Rob, like, this seems like you're doing this for a different reason. So even the rousing speech moment of the show is undercut by the fact that he doesn't necessarily want to be there and do these things.
So, what did people like about the show? Because when we talked about it before, based on just the first 2 episodes, we kind of gave it a 7 out of 10. Some missteps, that weird setup with the pagan religions, and the Saxons are totally pagan before the Normans came and imposed Christianity, all that weird stuff, kind of dragging things down, all the dead moms that we, from the first 2 episodes and all that. But we still overall gave it a 7 out of 10 and found some good things. What did people like about season 1 of Robin Hood?
I'll offer 3 things I liked about season 1. First thing I liked is that they actually have read and seem to care about the original source material. One thing that very much excited me about this show is that it's the first time I've ever seen Robin Hood's journey is it Robin Hood's journey to Nottingham or the Child Ballad
Yeah,
where
Robin Hood's
he
Progress. Yeah.
yeah, progress. It's the only I mean, you kind of did it a little bit with the story of Robin Hood with Richard Todd, where a forester he shoots a forester and who's shot his dad in the woods. So that there's some elements of it there. But this is the first time we've ever actually seen that ballad almost line for line get played out of like they start picking on him even for his bow and then they're like, yeah, shoot the deer. It's king deer. No, just shoot it. He does it. You owe me my pennies. No, get out of here. And then they fire at him first. He fires back and kills the guy, and off we go. I love that. I'm like, okay, these people have read source material. They actually know this content. They care about it. Also, I forget which book it was that they pulled from where it's like, okay, this is clearly the setup. Huntington is Marion's dad, and like, was it,
Walter McSpaden is the name of the author that seems to really have influenced at least their initial setup with
that's right.
the death of Robin's father and all in this show.
Yes. So very much from the beginning, it seems like we have people who've actually cared about the ballads and the story in general. That's number one. Number two, I really love the look of the show. I love that it's a bright, vibrant green Sherwood. I love that the medieval looks of the guards and the knights and like it looks, except for some of the things happening in the court and stuff, it looks pretty medieval. It seems to care about having a more historical vibe to it and the feel and look of the show. I I like how it looks. And then number three, I think there's some really talented people that are part of this. I mean, you've got some great actors, you've got some really talented cinematographers, writers. I do like that it's a long form, talented, visually appealing, cares about the original ballad portrayal of Robin Hood. And all those things I think are a good start to, I think, a show that now needs to grow. They've stretched a surface level value system too far. It's like that line from Bilbo, feel thin, sort of stretched like butter scraped over too much bread. That's what I would say is kind of happening with the plot and the writing. It's like they've taken kind of some nugget of ideas that are really, really good, but now they've just stretched it far too much and not done enough with it. But yeah, those three things, those are a good base to build off of. So I think what the show needs to do is actually lean into those things then. Lean into the historical, like, situational problems that people would find themselves in. I think that's something really good that the Richard Green show did, is it found a bunch of random medieval things like, oh, wait, there's this crazy law about this, or there's this crazy story about a knight who needed this or something. Like, lean into that. Lean into adapting the ballads more, explore those more, find the humanity in those more, like they did with the Robin Hood's journey to Nottingham. They need to lean more into that and stop trying to force the show to be whatever they think Game of Thrones is,
Yeah, I was
and
about to
just
say
let
trying to force it
be
into Game of
Robin.
Thrones. Yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to force these ballads into a Game of Thrones structure while actually not doing what Game of Thrones did right, oddly enough. But the more they lean into just doing the ballads and finding the humanity in those, I think they have a better chance of giving people a show they'll really like.
Yeah, I love that scene with Robin and the Foresters. I think that's probably one of my favorite moments in the 10 episode run. Thought that was a really cool to see that origin, like you say, on screen for the first time. I thought that the like it made the forest feel genuinely massive and expansive. Lots of really good sweeping shots from above and things. Very much with it making you feel like, oh yeah, no, this is a place you can get lost in if you don't sort of know these woods, and that sort of being the difference between Robin and his guys and the more Norman characters. I really liked a lot of the performances as well. I think that every time that Friar Tuck was on screen, I was like, "What's happening, man? This is great." He was very, I guess, differently cast than we would have expected a Friar Tuck to be, and so I was a bit apprehensive. But every time he was on screen, I was like, "Let's go, Friar Tuck time." I thought, yeah, I mean, to say Sean Bean is a good actor feels very sort of redundant and trite at this point, but I thought he was scene stealing in every sort of moment he was in. I thought it was very commanding watch.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also liked it. It's connected to what we just said was missing between the Merry Men, but I actually liked that they didn't just take to the life as outlaws, as in some Robin Hoods, they're just overnight, they're happy outlaws and they're adjusted to it and they just go with it. And Robin Hood is just the leader, just like that. And I liked that they were hesitant about that and they were unhappy to be in the forest and that they didn't know where to go. I thought that was more realistic than in some other shows. I mean, it wasn't necessarily very good, very nice for viewers. It lacked a bit of, what we just talked about, a bit of charisma perhaps, but it was realistic on the other side, on the other hand.
Yeah.
The action sequences were all really good. Like that last episode obviously was a lot of action. I thought that made it a really fun watch. I thought, yeah, whenever there was a big action scene, whether they were storming a castle or stealing gold, I thought those were really well put together and I really enjoyed those scenes.
I feel like the majority of the action scenes were pretty good. There's a couple where I was like, ooh, that got a little rough when they do the massacre of the foresters' huts, and I forget one of the later episodes. That one was pretty rough. Some of the action there, but for the most part, I agree. Yeah.
At least you could see what was going on all the time. There wasn't any
Yes.
fuzzy, rushed editing, quick cutting to pretend that there's energy. There was actual energy, and they were actually showing people physically moving around rather than cutting to very tight close-ups and things. All the action looked like it was what it was supposed to be, rather than just whizzing around and us having to do the work. All of the action scenes, fight scenes were really tight, I think.
Yeah, there was some stunt work there. Yeah.
I'll add another thing I actually liked. I think they added a lot of new supporting characters that felt interesting and well fleshed out. Like in the court, you have that other like handmaid servant lady who Isabella, I think her name was, or something,
Celine.
but Celine, yeah, like she felt like a real kind of person who would fit in that world and a good foil for Marion. Even at Marion's house, you have her brothers, who I think that was interesting to kind of have those characters, and they feel authentic. They help kind of make the world feel a little bit real. You also even like I think it's like Huntington's like Master of Arms. He's just kind of a guy who's there. He felt like a really interesting character, and I'd like to know more about him.
Hmm.
And yeah, of course, in Robinstown, you have the Foresters, you have the Gamwells, you have the bride. I think her name was probably Isabel, I think. Right? The bride who gets killed. But yeah, like a lot of very like good little supporting characters all around the show. Melange,
Yeah, I was
interesting
gonna say,
character.
I think Melange is actually my favorite character from the season, the
Yeah,
Spice
Yeah.
Melange.
obviously, so we talk about sort of fidelity with the ballads and sort of and Robin Hood is an idea, but I like that they were willing to introduce new characters to this story that felt very much at home. Like, I mean, maybe this might be my lack of knowledge, but the Spraggett I don't think he's based on anyone. And I thought sort of at first I was like, okay, what are we doing with this guy? But as it went on, I was like, no, this guy's I like what he adds to this Merry Men group. And yeah, Melange I thought was a really interesting ad. I think Priscilla was set up as a really interesting character. So I liked that they were like giving us these classic characters, but also introducing like their own. I always think it's fun in a Robin Hood movie or story where it's like it's all the merry men I know and one extra merry man I've never seen before, but I'm very invested in right now. Again, if
Yeah,
any of those are classic characters, I apologize. I made a mistake.
no, you're dead on. They're not, and I think this is both a strength and kind of in some ways a weakness because rather than put in the time to actually have Will of Gamwell, aka Will Scarlet, be part of the show, or put in the effort to make Little John fun and interesting, they just had these new characters be fun and interesting. So Little John gets to be just there because you expect the Little John to be there. But oh, we'll have the person that's actually like fun and make some quips be this new character we invented.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is the biggest strength of the show is the fact that every single character is really well thought out on paper, clearly, But whether or not that translates to them actually getting screen time and showing that is a different thing. So things like John being Little John being the second most important character really in the whole thing, in the whole, Robin Hood pantheon to
Hmm.
Rob, certainly the second oldest, but he's very lucky if he gets a couple of lines an episode. But the work is there to put all of these characters in this world. So the Bible that they would have been working off to make the scripts must be huge, full of details, but just none of those details made it across into the show.
Every now
They,
and then you would get like a snippet of it, like the one scene that
yeah,
Swigert had at the campfire with the one lady where you hear some of
yeah,
the
yeah,
backstory. It's
yeah.
like, oh, that's clearly something they snipped out of his character Bible. But then, like, why
That's
isn't
it.
this scene with Rob? Why isn't this scene with
Mm,
somebody for him to make a connection with who isn't going to get
mm,
killed the next time they're on screen?
exactly. And I think there's sort of like two sort of examples of how that runs in the show. So we got the first one being the bride from the first episode, where clearly they're setting up that this is going to be a romantic interest for Will because it's the whole thing of he, was in love with her, but she's marrying this other guy instead. And that obviously has little sprinkles of the Alan Dale story, the classic Alan
Mm-hmm.
Dale story of Robin helping his friend marry the person that he is supposed to be with, sort of thing.
Right.
But then, as Mike said, she died in the last episode with Will on his way to Rome. So it's like they don't quite see what they have. We think that they do, but then the fact that it just doesn't get paid off shows that they're just not quite aware of the things that they're setting up. The other extreme of that is, I think, the entire character of Ralph, which is one of the most like fascinating characters in the thing, but they
Hmm.
don't quite realize why Ralph is so fascinating. So you can do all sorts of things with Ralph, and then especially pairing Ralph and Melange as well, having these two queer-coded characters, one more explicit than the other, but obviously two queer-coded characters.
Yeah.
And that's a really fantastic way to start thinking about ideas of, gender performance and identity and being yourself. I really thought in that later episode where Melange is talking to Ralph about Ralph's crush on Rob, we were going to have this really great moment of them talking about being their true selves in the forest and that sort of thing. But again, they don't quite realize what they've got there. And so what we get is a scene where Melange makes Ralph a dress to wear for the boy. And so it just went so far back in the other direction when I think most people watching it could see it going off in what really is kind of the logical place for it to go, or the path of least resistance because it is so well established, but it
Yeah.
goes somewhere else and it's forcing itself to go somewhere else. And that's kind of the thing with the whole show, I think, is that you have these fantastic characters and fantastic setups, and it naturally eases in one direction, but then it's being pushed really hard in another direction. And it's really confusing why it's going in a way that seems completely opposite to the way that it should be going.
Yeah,
And
Ralph. Oh, sorry.
uh yeah, no, you go ahead, Alex. You go ahead. I know you've got some thoughts about Ralph.
Well, Ralph was the character sort of on paper when they were talking about the characters. I was like, oh, hell yeah. Like, I love a character that plays with gender. Like, I think having that presentation of a character who, like you say, is free in the woods and presents in a more masculine way. I was like, oh, that they can do some really interesting stuff with that. And I think there are like nuggets there of the character of like, oh, there's something to
Hmm.
play with when it comes to the gender presentation or understanding of that character.
There was a
Um,
brilliant moment like early on when Rob was like, "You're a girl, aren't you?" And I think Ralph's response was, "What I am is my business."
You're a girl.
What I am is my business.
mm, I just think conceptually as a character, I think that's brilliant, and I like that it just and that's I think why because it was that like Ralph, sorry, mangling my words completely. Ralph and Freya Turk, I would say, were the characters that whenever they popped up on screen, I was like, I'm gonna have a great time with the scene because like, every scene with Ralph playing with that gender and like how do you exist when whether you were taking this as a character that is trans analogous or a character that is as they say in the show a character who is forced to present more masculine to because of responsibilities they have and how that affects their own personal idea of gender. That's so interesting. There's so much you could do with that. And then we kind of have a scene where, like you say, Melange, the other queer coded character, is like, well, but you should wear a dress because you're a woman. And it's said really like firmly from a character that doesn't always use that tone. I was just going,
And
all
that's
right,
how you'll get the
Jesus.
boy.
Yeah, did Margaret Thatcher call? What happened? Like, and I just really threw me off. And I think there's interesting stuff to be had with, the idea that maybe are you pushing yourself to engage more with prescribed gender because you think it gives you attractiveness or you think it gives you value to someone that you have feelings for. But it's not really interested in exploring that. It just has Ralph show up and say, I wanted you to see me how I really am, in a very blunt, and that's the full stop, end of sentence scene. And then by end of the next episode, Ralph is presenting as masculine again, in a very masculine way again, is still going by the name Ralph, which I thought was actually something that was potentially interesting. Like, oh, you exist in the woods, you present as your sort of as a woman again amongst these people because you feel safe, but then you stop and you still continue to go by a masculine name, despite the fact that the show reveals Ralph's birth name in an earlier scene. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Are we examining that? No, they're just all calling Ralph Ralph. Fair enough. And I didn't this is tangential to the whole gender play of it all. I didn't mind Ralph as a other love interest. I'm very pro Robin and Marion. I'm like, oh my God, they're the people who've been falling in love for centuries. I can't wait to see the people who've fallen in love for centuries fall in love again. But I liked Ralph as a character, and I think Ralph's affection for Robin really made sense. And I was interested to see how that dynamic played out, because I liked the dynamic they had and how the dynamic between Ralph's gender presentation played out. And I don't think I was super satisfied with how that all tied up.
Yeah. Emily, you have any thoughts that you want to jump in with at this point?
Well, I'll just I don't know if this is technically jumping back at this point, but some things that I did like. I too liked Friar Tuck. He was always wonderful to see. He made the most sense for me as a character in a Robin Hood show. He felt like he belonged in a Robin Hood show, so I always really enjoyed having him there. And then the other thing that I liked that I also wish could have seen a bit more of was that Marion and Priscilla had a friendship. It was nice to have Marion with a female friend who wasn't like a dowdy handmaid or, nurse or some such character. It was nice to have her
have an
like
equal
get some
as a
real
friend.
girl time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Someone that she was really like, connecting with as another woman. So I really enjoyed that. And I liked that the forest was green and the forest was really there. I think that's something that has been missing in a lot of Robin Hood adaptations recently. So it was good to have a big green forest that people were living in. So yeah, so those are my three things that I liked about this show.
Yeah, fair enough. So in regards to Marion and the parts that weren't the nice green forest and were all at the court in Winchester, how did people feel about that part of the show? Because I know I've got some feelings there.
I thought they were pretty boring. I was so disappointed that I thought they were boring too, because I always really want to enjoy Marion in her story. And it was, talking and discussions. And for the major part of the series, Marion scenes at court where her being called into a meeting with another character where the other character would tell her things. And that was her scene for the whole episode, would be someone is going to tell her things. And it was just really boring. I think the only part I really enjoyed about court was when Marion arrived and we kind of got this introduction to this new setting, and it really felt like a working environment. Like, this is a place where people have jobs and have roles, and it was really interesting to me, and I was kind of excited to see Marion kind of slot into this working household. I really enjoyed seeing that in this pseudo historical setting. I thought that was really cool and interesting for it not just to be, oh, it's pretty and courtly, but no, this is a working environment. I liked that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where on paper it's incredible. Like we couldn't want anything more, I think, from a Marion setup who isn't with Robin, is to have her be with Eleanor in London doing intrigue, basically. But
Hmm.
yeah, as you say, there's just it's just people talking, and they're not even talking about things that are actually happening. They're talking about, I think the case in point is when it's been 3 or 4 episodes of this, and then Prince John arrives, and instead of shaking things up, it's the same thing where he turns up and talks about the things that he has done, that he wants to do, that he's thinking of doing, but they don't actually change it up and turn it into a different dynamic. It's still just they clearly had a set with 3 walls, and you had to shoot from one particular angle because every time they cut to that room of Eleanor's in Westminster, I just couldn't help but think of those like TikTok stories that are ads where it's like melodrama and there's a whole string of series of these people just in one set talking. It seemed like a TikTok ad from just the way that it was in one direction and then it turned to maybe a slightly different direction. But the fact that it was shot identically just didn't help the fact that they, again, clearly didn't know what they had when it comes to this setup because they just thought, well, what do we do here? Oh, we'll just have them talk about stuff. But again, because they're so stuck, there's nothing for them to actually talk about. It's just talking. And
Hmm.
it's really difficult to go through 7 episodes of that when they're not talking about anything different. They're talking about the same things. They're talking about it with little differences of minor inflections about what's going on elsewhere in the plot. But as far as what they are actually doing, it's still just talking about other characters doing things. None of them actually do things. Marion has to physically leave Westminster to go back to where she started for that to be meaningful to her.
Yeah. And even her first scene with John, to have something exciting happen and, a meaningful interaction with John, that also couldn't be in the palace. It had to be off somewhere where she gets waylaid by random thugs and John comes and saves her. Like, we can't have anything interesting happen at Castle other than gratuitous sex scenes.
That scene with John too, it's like I kind of expected them to reveal later that that was a setup, that John paid the guys to do it so that he could then look like the hero. Nope. Like just again, all these little things where like you said, there's so many opportunities to show powerful intrigue versus just characters talk about it. Like, and I think this goes back to where the show is attempting to then kind of recapture some of the magic of Game of Thrones, like political intrigue plots, but then they don't actually do what they did in Game of Thrones. Like, for example, in Game of Thrones, if you want to see palace intrigue, you have a very good scene where Tyrion essentially sets up the main 3 advisors and he tells them each a different thing of I'm going to marry the princess off, but remember the queen mustn't know. And it cuts between him telling them each a different thing and what his reasoning is for why. And he's like, but remember the queen mustn't know. Cersei
Hmm.
then immediately comes to him with the story, so he knows which guy told her. And then he goes, he grabs him, and he basically attacks him. And then he gets the real information that he wants from him. And afterwards, they're like, "Oh, well done." That's a great way to show political intrigue, not just say, "Hi, I'm Tyrion. I'm really smart and I'm really powerful. No one messes with me." I felt
I'm
like so
going
many
to
of the
do an
scenes.
intrigue now.
Yeah, it's like so many of the scenes where a character just walks up to the a character's like, "Hey, I'm awesome," and then the other character's like, "No, I'm really awesome," and it's just, "No, I'm more awesome. No, I'm more awesome." It's like nothing is actually happening. It's just I people telling each other how smart they are, like how big their intrigue plan is. Show us stuff. If they actually want to do Game of Thrones stuff with this, they actually have to think about what actually happens in Game of Thrones. How do they actually do political intrigue? They show it.
I also thought it was kind of interesting that her big thing was like, oh, I don't want John to take his father's throne. Like, but we all know that Richard will because he's older. That's how that works. Like, I wasn't really sure why there was this clash it kind of didn't really make any sense since Henry was still king. Like, who's gonna, who's gonna have the throne after him? But we would already know that, right? Like, maybe I
Well,
just don't know my
Not
history,
necessarily
but
at this time.
Yeah,
okay.
So,
primogeniture wasn't strictly established at that time, and Henry has a lot of leeway in terms of who he can grant basically different titles and different lands to. And that was a big conflict that happened amongst the Plantagenets. A lot of
And
the
I don't know
plot
my history then. That's fine.
but yeah, but you're also, to your point though, to our modern understanding, like to a modern audience, it is going to usually just read like, oh yeah, oldest son inherits. And they didn't do the work of explaining how that might not necessarily be the case. So unless you happen to know that, oh yes, in the late 12th century, the standard of primogeniture wasn't firmly established, like you wouldn't know that, and it would come across as a little
mm,
bit weird and confusing.
yeah, if they had a way to maybe just give the viewers a quick backstory of the Lion in Winter, essentially, which is if it's a great play and an amazing movie, which is about that family. It's Henry and Eleanor at the Winter Court, and Prince Richard and Prince Joffrey and Prince John are all there, and they're all squabbling over the phone. And Henry does favor John to be on the throne, not Richard, because Richard and Eleanor have led so many revolts against him at this point. And historically, yeah, like everyone, like it was Henry and John against them for a while, and then John teamed up with Richard and like all this stuff. So yeah, it would be nice if the show is gonna bake a lot of history into it. Start playing with it. Have fun. Let that be a
mm.
lot of the palace intrigue.
Since the show is presumably set right before Henry II's death, it could be during one of the times when Richard is actively at war against him.
Mm.
And then John aligned with him too. So John and Richard actually teamed up at the end, and that's partly what they think killed Henry, is he was so disappointed in John.
Yeah, going back to the thing with Eleanor's whole intrigue thing, it's interesting hearing Connie Nielsen talk about Eleanor in the press stuff ahead of time, because it's again goes back to that thing of they clearly had so much background that they forgot maybe to put in the actual show. Maybe because it's just that thing of like any writer who's lived with something in their head for so long, then when it comes to writing it, they forget to actually write it down. But the way that Colin Nielsen talks about Eleanor is in this fascinating thing of she re almost sympathizes with Rob, because this, I think she had a quote in one of her interviews where she said the same person that's responsible for all the oppressions in England is responsible for her oppression as well, being obviously Henry. So the idea that she wants to revolt against Henry because Henry's been, we don't necessarily get this explanation in the show, but I think, anyone who's, again, seen The Lion Winter or knows a bit of the history of Eleanor teaming up with Henry's son since she gets locked up for years and years, she feels constricted by Henry and wants Rob's rebellion to do well because she sympathizes with him as someone who's oppressed by his lack of interest in England. But then when we have the show, what happens in the actual show is just Eleanor's pulling other people's strings to do pretty minor stuff. And then she has an argument with John, and then that's about it. So again, these things are clearly well thought through, or at least the actors bring a lot of their own thoughts to the way that they put these things forward. But what we actually get on screen when we're sitting down to watch an episode is completely different to the way that things are necessarily being played. Again, like Melange. Like Melange clearly has so much going for him, but that's coming from James Farley, the actor, not necessarily coming from the script. We have really interesting stuff happening with Ralph, which, to be fair, is in the script, but they don't realize how much they can push it. And so a lot of that comes from both James Farley and Erica Ford, who plays Ralph. So much of the actors are bringing themselves to the roles to the point where the characters seem like there's much more to bite off than there is. And the Eleanor example's probably one of the largest examples in that there's so much complicated politics going on, but all of that's going on in Connie Nielsen's head while she's performing words that are nothing like that. Nothing like the thoughts that she has when she's performing.
I would say very much the same also with the characters of Priscilla and the sheriff too.
Yeah, Priscilla was a really interesting character when she was introduced, not just because she's, as you said, Emily, a friend to Marion, which was a really interesting thing to throw in. She starts having visions, which is another sort of twist on throwing in these sort of competing religions and the almost more mystical elements. That was interesting. Another thing that they just seem to have dropped with the pagan stuff and her position with relation to her gender as being sort of being very subservient to her father or being or having to sort of work around him to continue to have a happy life was sort of really interesting. But more than focus on that, we got a lot of scenes where, sinister, evil music played while she had sex with someone very graphically. And it's like, oh, okay, so instead of intrigue, we're getting evil sex. And that just felt a bit odd.
Marcia, do you have any comments about the palace scenes and how they handled any of those things?
Well, I was kind of surprised how easily Eleanor trusted Marion with all this court information. I thought, why you pick someone to be a spy? Okay, I get that, but why tell them so much? That was a bit weird to me. Like it was perhaps more to tell us as the audience, and they just put Marion there to have somebody to tell it to. But that was rather weird to me. And I don't really know why they have Priscilla in the story. I mean, she's so to the side of the main plot. Maybe she's there to introduce the marshal. I don't know, but I don't
Well, and
see
he's
her.
ultimately very tangential to the story as well.
Yeah, I think if anyone deserves a shout out for the burden that is his character, it's Oscar Salem playing William Marshall. Not because the role is bad, because I think he was perfectly cast in the role that they wrote for William Marshall. But I think there'll be people watching the show who are watching it for the medievalness, and in the medievalness, William Marshall's name is enormous, and the
Hmm.
role that Marshall has in this show is so unlike the real life William Marshall
Yeah.
that I think Oscar Salem's going to get, if anyone bothers to talk about it, is going to get sort of unfairly copped for being a bit of a shadow of what William Marshall actually was. And
Hmm.
again, that's just this show's thing of, like Mike was saying, like if you're going to do a Game of Thrones style political intrigue, you have to sort of do the political intrigue. If you're going to do William Marshall, God, you have to do William Marshall.
Yeah. Yeah. Greatest knight, known for his loyalty, both to his king and to his wife. Um, and this character felt like I would have been fine with this character if they had just created a new character, which they were fine with doing, as we were saying before, in terms of, Melange and Spraggart and other new characters. Why they didn't just invent a new character, I don't know, rather than do this version of a character that felt so unlike the historical real, not even just like a figure from literature, a historical real person, have it be somebody so wildly different. And then I also just found that the way they costumed him to be very off-puttingly weird. He had this Tudor style half cape and brocade that made him look like he belonged on the set of Shakespeare in Love or The Tudors. And there were scenes where he's wearing this and he's standing next to Sean Bean's sheriff, and Sean Bean's sheriff is wearing chainmail and a surcoat. It would be like doing a movie set during the Revolutionary War and one character is just walking around in a modern Wall Street business suit. It was incredibly incongruous. I mean, and and then the show wasn't perfect by any stretch in terms of its costuming and the anachronisms, but there was a little bit of praise it got earlier for at least having this right sort of vibe of feeling medieval. And he's just stuck out like such a sore thumb in every scene he was in.
Agreed.
But it wasn't the actor's fault, and the actor didn't, to Will's, as Will was saying, like didn't do a bad job with the material he was given, the role he was given. He was just the costuming choices were very odd, and having him be this real historical person, but entirely different than that historical person, was just odd. Not the worst interpretation of William Marshall in a Robin Hood adaptation, though. I think that dubious honor belongs to Henry Daniell in The Bandit of Sherwood Forest when William Marshall was scheming to take over England.
Yeah, that
At
movie
least
was
he gets
rough.
shipped off to Rome. But jumping back to, yeah, the question of what's Priscilla doing. So we could introduce William Marshall, but again, introduces anyone but William Marshall. But it's interesting because when earlier in the season, there were those clues about her being set up to be a future villain and thinking that there was something larger for her as far as the role is concerned, as far as the world of Robin Hood is concerned. And then we have to give credit to Alan Wright from boldoutlaw.com for finding the McSpadden connection.
Yes,
And
yes,
in
thanks for
that book,
crediting him. Yeah.
yeah, and in that book, we have the nameless sheriff of Nottingham's daughter, who, as it turns out, then becomes or, at the end of the book, it says, some say that the prioress of Kirklees was, in fact, the sheriff of Nottingham's daughter from way back who wanted revenge on Robin Hood. And so it was at least nice to see that those wild conclusions that we were excitedly jumping to, going, oh, what's Priscilla going to be in the future? Like a Morgana style sort of, witch from within story, which they seem to have dropped to some degree, but then brought back in the last couple of episodes with nuns. So she's going to be a bit of both. So the Prioress of Kirklees thing seems very much on the cards. But as we now know, very much drawn from that McSpadden novel. So it's an interesting way of trying to introduce that character by having her do evil sex all the time and then nothing much for the middle part of the season to then come back and just put her in the costume, the nun costume. But yeah, she went on a bit of an up and down. When you thought she was going to go one place, she went another place, and then just a hard turn into a nun by the end.
Yeah. Yeah. And they did a lot of interesting things, as you were saying early, to kind of set her up as a individual with a lot of agency. I liked the one bit she had early, and to be this kind of friend, but also foil to Marion. I liked the bit. I didn't like the bit where Marion's father was smacking her around. That was hard to watch. But the bit later when Priscilla notices that Marion has been bruised and realizes what has happened and says, if my father ever did that to me, I would poison him, and he knows it.
If my father touched me, I would poison him, and he knows it.
What like great moment of agency and saying so much about the dynamic between her and her father. But then they didn't really do anything with her, and she ended up getting this romance story with William Marshall and then feeling like the aggrieved, broken woman because he left to go to Rome at Eleanor's bequest. She went from somebody so strong and compelling to somebody really weak. It was frustrating.
And it does unfortunately go down that route of female agency is punished, or the wrong kind of female agency is punished. Because, I mean, there is probably an argument to be made about this being, oh, well, it's, set in the Middle Ages, and so she can't be going around having sex with whoever she wants. It's like, well, that's stupid because this is a TV show. You choose the boundaries that you set up and you choose the rules. And clearly, in those first couple of episodes, the way that they're positioning Priscilla as someone who is choosing things for herself. Like there's that I think we might have talked about this in the first discussion, but the thing where we're trying to make light, or not make light of, but like try to put a positive spin on the gratuitous sex element, where it's like, well, at least it's Priscilla turning things around. So that moment where the guard then starts to enjoy it for his own his own pleasure. And then she goes, no, 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 this isn't about you. This is about me, and turns it around. So it's having her have choices in her life and pleasure in her own life. But because of the framing of the show, it's like, yes, but that's wrong. You can't have sex for fun. Sex isn't fun. You can't have these things that you enjoy doing as a woman because you will be punished for it. And then you've got Marion, who I guess in this context, in this show as well, is not, she had sex with Rob a couple of times and they're not married. So the logic of those boundaries and those rules sort of breaks apart a bit. But it is disappointing, again, putting Priscilla on a villain route, not exclusively because of her personality, but because it is sort of a punitive thing because of her relationship choices, especially when, she was flat out engaged to Marshall for a little bit. Then I guess they got bored of that and didn't want that to carry over. But she's been narratively punished for her agency, and in a show made in 2025, you either lean hard into that and make that like a tragedy, or you don't do it because it's a bit of a strange thing for modern audiences to accept, her being a villain just to get back at other people. So she's kind of having her life robbed from her in exactly the way that episode 1 establishes the sheriff doesn't want her to have. He wants her to have choices in the world. He educates her to then push back against people so she has this agency, and then having the sheriff turn around saying, I'm throwing you in a convent because of your life choices. It's just a bit of a strange way of having a character's, again, so complex, but they don't realize quite how complex. And so they do all the work to make her interesting and complex and then throw it away because you shouldn't be pregnant.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, you behaved poorly. So now your agency is taken away.
I do think it's kind of interesting talking about Priscilla and her interest in sex. And then also how both Priscilla and the Queen talked to Marion kind of as if she was a bit of a prude for not initially pursuing sex. And the show kind of sets it up like, oh, Marion's narrative and her story is kind of going to take a turn once she finally decides to have sex. So I feel like there's a lot of conflicting messages that the show is sending about how they feel about women pursuing and having sex. There's just a lot of different tones that they're taking with it. And I think it feels kind of confused.
Yeah, I would agree.
And there's another scene there too where it has to do with Robin and Ralph, where she literally, and when we were watching this scene, my fiance and I, we were like, oh, this is so awkward and like hard to watch. But she dresses for him. He just stands there, stares her, kind of looks her up and down a little bit, and then just walks away. And we're like, oh, that's so sad. Like, why was this the choice he made? Like, no. And then they just kind of move on. I don't think they address it in the next scene at all. Or it's just like, oh man, like, yeah, there was, I heartily agree with what you said, Emily and Will. Like, there just felt like confusion on what are these characters communicating, and also how are they communicating back to each other. Like I get that Rob is supposed to be the leader, but man, like someone does that and that's how he responds. I'm like, that's not a very good leader. Like I wouldn't want to follow like him after that, or I don't know. It was just, yeah, I feel like the show had some confused like thematic messaging when it came to the topic of sexuality.
Yeah, it's almost like they wrote every scene that they wanted on post-it notes and then made them fit an episode runtime, because there's the thing where Rob and Ralph, we think, because the episode ends, we think they've gone to have sex with each other. And then the next episode begins and Ralph goes up to Robin all shy, and you think it's because they had sex with each other the night before. But Ralph says, why did you not take me to bed? And it's like, oh, as far as we're concerned, last week he did because we saw that. And so it's a confusing thing of choosing to end it there is strange. Could probably be a thing of just wanting that reaction from the audience to be like, oh no, they did it, and then to reveal that they didn't, and that's just a bit clumsy. But also it goes back to that thing of not quite realizing what you've got when you're writing it, because that would be a far more dramatic scene to have them go there and then Rob not do it. Like have the episode end with Rob stopping himself or not doing it, or being
Yeah.
clear that he doesn't want to do it in the first place. So like the scene where she's just naked by the lake and he's staring at her. You just have to sort of think of it from the perspective of literally sitting down to write the scene and going, what are you writing? Like, why is this the thing that you've put forward? And it's like that with the end of that episode where it's like, how have you not then gone ahead and written a dramatic tension between the two and he walks off? Instead, you've written up until a point, stopped, and then we've jumped ahead, like we were saying earlier with the random people coming to the forest. It narratively makes sense, but you have to do the work while you're watching the episode to figure out, okay, so how could this have possibly happened? It makes sense within the world, but not within the bounds of a 1 hour episode of television where things are happening between episodes that we're not privy to, not because it's a time jump like TV does, but it's a you haven't included this and we have to do the work to make this make sense. It's a very strange way of putting drama in something when the drama is inherent, but you remove the drama only to have people talk about the drama that you haven't shown.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of we're
Yeah.
going to talk about the drama that we don't show. A lot of
Yeah.
we're going to have people talking and saying the same things, like the same complaints we had about all of those scenes at court also apply to the scenes in Nottingham Castle. A lot of people just saying the same things over and over again as they sit at oak tables and drink from very large pewter wine cups. There was just a lot of the we're going to talk at you so much, but keep saying the same things, and yet fail to explain some really relevant things.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the show needs it needs us, honestly. Like if anyone who's part of the show is watching or listening to this episode, please, we are writers and we are massive Robin Hood fans and we care about your show. We want it to be good. We want it to be the best Robin Hood show ever made. Please hire us. Please bring us on as anything to help with your show. We can write. We're some most are writers. We've written stuff. I don't know. I think yeah, the writing is just uneven, which makes it clunky sometimes, which makes I think then the actors probably have to struggle because they're having to perform a character who's just flipping on a dime and not even getting some of those extra backstory things. So they're probably also having a hard time acting. So if someone's like, well, I didn't really care for some of the acting, it's like, well, try acting a character who's making 14 different choices that don't all line up with a consistent character arc. So yeah, I would just say please just enjoy, take a little bit more time with the writing for the show and hire us or at least talk to us. We'd love to help. We think you got something good. A lot of good little things built into the show already. Just needs the writing just needs a tweak up.
I can't speak for anybody else, but I can promise that my rates would be very, very low.
Mine too. Yes. All of us.
All right. Well, I have two questions for everybody. The first one is, how likely are you to recommend this show to somebody else? And the second question is, how excited do you feel for a second season?
I'll admit that this is a tricky question for me to answer because and maybe all of you feel this, but we're all so close to the themes and stories of Robin Hood. This is a personal, special story and character to all of us. Even when watching the show, I was recommending it to other people because I was like, I need to know if this is good or not because I'm such a fan. I'm so close to it. I know I'm watching it for a million little things in the show that no one would even, no normal person would think about. But as a super Robin Hood nerd, I'm like, oh, look at this. They did that. They did that. Well, that should have, and they're like, what? Oh, yeah, he's just going to go to town, right? He's you know. So I recommend the show just because I need other people to help me gauge my own brain compared to it. I'm like, are you watching the show the same way I'm watching it? How am I excited am I for season two? I like the world they've set up. I like where it could go, but based on what I saw them do with season one, I feel concerned. But yeah, I mean, we'll see. Show me a trailer.
All right. Marcia, how about you?
Well, I don't feel it as it hasn't captured me, but I like watching it just to be. I know it triggers a lot of discussion, and I actually like that. I like hearing people's thoughts about it. So I will watch it, and I will tell others to watch it, but not because I'm captured by it, just because there's a lot going on and it's interesting to see how it all works out and evolves.
Mm-hmm. Alex, how about you?
I mean, it's like you say, Mike, it is obviously we watch this thing a little bit differently. I think I was watching, I think, the first couple of episodes of 3 episodes. I was like, oh my God, they've not introduced Little John. What are they going to do with Little John? And then they mentioned, we're going to have to cross the river if we're going to want to get through the forest. And I think I was like, oh my God, it's Little John. They're going to the river. And so I was watching with my housemate, and I think their reactions. I think I know I like parts of it because I like Robin Hood and I like the general vibe, and I think I dislike parts of it because it doesn't have that general vibe of Robin Hoodness that I think a show or movie or book needs to properly capture me. But I don't know if there is enough in the way of character writing drama that I would, for this season at the very least, say, oh no, this I don't think I can confidently say this is a genuinely good medieval romance or medieval adventure, just because, as we've said, sort of the inconsistencies and sort of the interesting characters that they've clearly thought up an interesting character and then don't quite utilize perfectly. But I'm always I know I love so many shows where the first season I'm like, okay, but once you get past the first season and a half, it's one of the best TV shows ever made. So it would be hypocritical of me to not have the hope that what is season 2 absolutely kicks ass. Like, I think that's kind of how I feel about it. Maybe every TV show where I'm like, oh, I didn't like season 1, but I mean, these people, they have written an episode, they've written a season of television. They can do it again. I've seen great writers write bad TV. I've seen bad writers write great TV, you know, so I think I'm choosing optimism, I guess, and being very hopeful that, hey, season 2 might be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Emily?
I'll say that before the show actually started, when we had, trailers and promotionals, I was recommending it to people. I was trying to get people to come in and watch it because I wanted it to get the numbers, because I wanted a second season. And I was really, really excited for this new Robin Hood show that looked so promising. But then after it started, I did just kind of stop recommending it to people because it did just feel like such a letdown. I mean, that said, I did tune in every single Sunday to watch the new episode, but I'm also, coming at it from being a massive Robin Hood fan, where I want to engage in this new Robin Hood media. I want to see what they do with it. And I do have a lot of hope for it, even as each week went by and I was disappointed once again. But I did recommend it, and then I stopped recommending it. As far as season 2 goes, I'm gonna side with Alex here, and I'm really gonna hope that they find their sea legs a bit and figure out how to steer this in a direction that feels a little bit better than it does right now. And I know that I'm gonna be tuning in for season 2 if they get a green light for it. Again, because I want it to do well. I want it to succeed. I want it to be good. And I also want to be able to engage in these types of discussions about it with all of you fine folks. So, yeah, I mean, overall, I coming out of this, I do kind of feel like my 7 out of 10 dropped to like maybe a 2 or 3 out of 10, which is kind of disappointing for me. But I am still tuning in. I'm still here. I'm still ready for it to be something that I can really kind of sink my teeth into and enjoy it. I hope.
Emily, was a big part of that dip for you that they killed Guy of Gisborne without him? Because I think that partly did it for me, knowing like, okay, well, at least Guy of Gisborne can come and we can get a new interesting villain that can be played up. And then all of a sudden he's killed. He never even meets Robin. I'm like, oh no, I don't know what I have to look forward to now. Is that partly what did it for you?
I mean, I think the biggest dip for me was that so many of the episodes were just a muddle of the same thing over and over and over again, that I just started to feel bored. I didn't feel like I could tune in and have a story. I just felt like I was going to tune in and see more of the same. And there also just wasn't anything about the show that felt like Robin Hood, except Friar Tuck. So I think that for me was the dip, that the first two episodes, when I did give it that 7 out of 10, I'm like, okay, they're set up, they're ready to go. I can see where this is going to be good. This can be good, but it never took the setup that they gave it and went in a place that felt satisfying. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
but I do think
admire.
it's a real shame that Robin and Guy Gisborne never had a moment. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, that was weird.
So,
I admire Will's ability to tell us what happened in specific episodes because
yeah.
they really did muddle together for me. I had such a hard time, especially in the whole like middle like episodes 4 through 8. Like they all blended together for me. Will, would you recommend this show to other people, and how excited do you feel for season 2?
Yeah, I feel like I just need to caveat what I'm about to say with the fact that I loved it. Like I did love the show because it is a new Robin Hood show in the year 2025, and we love Robin Hood. And so I really, really loved it. I really genuinely loved the characters. Every single character is well thought out. Even, like Mike said, the Huntington's servant, he had one line that meant that he had a really deep thought out plot and character to him. And I really love the cast. It looks incredible. So I did genuinely enjoy the show. But that being said, I don't necessarily think it's where it could be. So, like we've been saying this whole time, it doesn't quite know what it's got with itself. So, in recommending it, it would be a recommendation, but with a lot of asterisks behind it. Because, like Emily said, the trailer made it look incredible. But the more the show went on, the more we sort of realized that that wasn't the show that it actually was. So I think the thing that got it for me was when we watched the trailer and there's the phrase, let's be thieves with a purpose. And I just thought this is great because they're putting purpose into all of this. They're thinking it through. There's that scene where someone is handing someone else a piece of bread. And so like, this is fantastic. But then we watch the show, the thieves with purpose line is in episode 7 of 10. And it's actually really about Rob doing Eleanor a favor more than it is anything about Rob, let alone helping the poor. And then the scene where he hands over a piece of bread is actually him giving a piece of bread to Tuck that he stole from Tuck to get Tuck to talk to them. And it's got nothing to do with giving anyone anything. And so the recommendation aspects, like, yes, absolutely. Watch a brand new Robin Hood TV show. Watch a brand new piece of media that is beautifully made. Like the cinematography is incredible. The acting is incredible. But with the note that this isn't necessarily the Robin Hood that you expect it to be, not because it's, a twist on it, but just because what you want in Robin Hood isn't necessarily there. And I think that's the interesting thing reading all these other reviews, which are completely positive. I think we're negative, not necessarily negative, but we're critical just because we are so close to it. So we're picking it apart, not because we're being negative, but because we're picking it apart because we're close to it. But then you look at other reviews and they're through the roof with people saying this is the best Robin Hood I've ever seen. And so it is very positively received, but there is that disconnect between, well, is it just entertaining versus is it a proper Robin Hood series? And so I think going into the second season, am I excited about it if it happens? It's like, well, yes, I will be, like Emily said, we'll be there every Sunday watching every episode. But I just think that this isn't necessarily going to be the show that we want it to be. I think it's very clear that when they talk about Rob is going to become something in future. Tuck says this isn't who you were supposed to be. I think it's pretty clear that they are not talking about charity. They are not talking about give to the poor in the context of giving the poor food for their stomachs and clothes for their back. They're talking about the rebellion that is brewing. They're talking about freedom in a very broad sense. It's not going to be a show where we see people coming together and eating together and laughing together. It's going to be a show where groups of people band together and there's a fight. And there's a fight for platitudes, not a fight for stopping people from being hungry. And so I think when getting over that mental hump and the emotional hump of this not being what we want it to be, it is going to be very good. It is going to be something that is very self-contained, but it is going to be something that hopefully, if they do it well, is going to be consistent. I just think if it's more of the same, then it's going to be a problem because, again, this is 6 episodes tops stretched out to 10. But if they sort of learn from the mistakes of this first season where they have almost nothing going on in some episodes, it will be okay. It's just that there's the secondary thing of us as Robin Hood fans going, this isn't going to be what we want it to be. And that's okay. It's not, maybe the most exciting thing in the world. Again, going back to that first trailer, going, wow, they're feeding people. They're talking about purpose. It's going to be something different to what, and whether it's only a 2-season show, if they get a second season, whether it's a 5-season show, I still think it's not going to be it's not going to end with Robin in a hat and, in Lincoln Green
No, that's
and
impossible to
people,
imagine.
yeah, and people laughing in the forest and skipping around. I just think it's clear that it's never going to be a happier kind of Robin Hood. There may be a happy ending narratively in that everyone gets what they want, but it's not going to be the type of Robin Hood that I think we were maybe hoping it would. And that's probably on us more than on the show. It's more on, God, what if dream list, what would we like to see out of a Robin Hood show? And it's just not going to be that. But what it will be, or what it has the potential to be, is something a bit different. And so I really hope that they, learn from the speed bumps and keep emphasizing the things that are very, very good in this show, which is the characters, and appreciate the settings that they have, because it's all there. It's all there on paper. They just need to realize what they have and boost that a little bit more.
Yeah. So I am going to have to make Rick watch the show so we can rate Jack Patton on our ranked list of all the Robin Hoods at some point. But other than that, I do think I would have a hard time recommending the show to people just in large part because there is so much good television out there. Because there are other Robin Hood television shows that I think are better done as far as stories go. And there's also a lot of really good historical dramas and fictions out right now. If somebody's looking for an action show, a historical drama, I don't think the writing is there for this to be the show where I'd be like, oh, here's one that you'll really enjoy. Because unfortunately, I don't think it rises to that level. I do think somebody can enjoy it. While I was let down, it didn't feel like a chore to watch it every Sunday. My partner and I watched every episode together. I think she was even more critical than I was about the quality of the writing, but she was still like, "Ooh, it's Sunday. Let's watch the new Robin Hood." She was, still on board. So I think somebody can have a good time watching it, but I don't know that I would necessarily recommend it. But I am still looking forward to seeing what they would do with the second season. As Alex was saying, a lot of the time that first season can be the one where they're finding their footing. And as Will just said, hopefully they learn some lessons and things could gel together in a much stronger, better way. Sometimes you kind of need to get your initial ideas, which they very clearly had for this, out of the way before you can really let the characters breathe and tell new and interesting stories. And that's what I would hope to see out of a second season. And as Will was saying, also, they're good characters and they're well acted characters, as we were saying. So they're not hard to spend time with.
And given the production that they have as well in Serbia, like the amazing sets they have and the landscape they have, if this is like a 3, 4, 5-season show, it honestly I wouldn't put it past them to shift from England and have Rob join Richard and they have like a crusade season. Because again, it seems like it's not the kind of show where it's set in Sherwood Forest and there's, it's not about people being together for the sake of being together. It's about the big picture. And so you can almost picture it as like a novel series. Like there's another universe where this is a novel and you can sort of see what the fourth novel would be. And it's about Richard. It's kind of like the Angus Donald thing where it's like the more it goes on, the crazier it gets. I honestly wouldn't put it past them for each season to sort of have a completely different vibe to it. And by season 3, we'll be having, famous actor as Richard and they go off to the Holy Land together. Like it wouldn't be beyond the realm of possibility given where they're filming this show and where all of the production is set to do something that isn't in England the whole time. It'll be interesting to see if they get the second season where Marshall will just then come back on the same boat, on the same set, saying, I have been to Rome. Or if they have a couple of episodes in Rome, because it seems like they're interested in not being locked in, which is...
Actually give Will Scarlet something to do.
Yeah, remember that he exists. Poor Henry Rowley. He's incredible as Will. He's the most uniquely positioned of all the characters to have a unique relationship with Rob, and they kind of forget to write him scenes. So there's plenty of potential and potential outside of the traditional boundaries, which could be very exciting for us. Like if as Robin Hood people were so used to seeing things set in Sherwood Forest, them running around in Sherwood Forest or in Nottingham. If we have a season of a Robin Hood show where the primary location, like this season, to be honest, like one of the primary locations, 50% of this was set in London. It wasn't set in Nottingham. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that they do set a season in Accra or something. Like, go nuts. Like, if they
I
choose to just throw everything to the wind and just go nuts, then that could be the greatest turnaround, is just to not be locked in and just go crazy. That would be awesome.
I wouldn't be at all surprised if most of the next season is set in London. Not just in court like this one was, but also like in the London streets and all, with Ralph and Melange there too. Yeah. Well, any last thoughts? Anything else anybody wanted to get off their chest about the show before we wrap up here?
I think
MGM,
it's
please let us help you create the second season. Thank you.
I am interested in this version of the characters. I am interested in this version of the quote unquote world of Robin Hood. I want to see Ralph again. I want to see Friar Tuck again because he's very pretty. And yeah, so I'll be tuning in, looking forward to seeing, where they take it, where they take these characters that I am genuinely invested in and interested to see how they handle.
If Little John and Friar Tuck don't kiss, I'm breaking my TV.
And that's why MGM need to hire us for that.
Swear to God, we're waiting the whole show. Like my partner's main reason for continuing with the rest of the show is waiting for that moment, and it didn't come. When John and Tuck have their big argument, and John says, "You belong here," I honestly thought he was going to say, "With me," and I was like, "Is that my projecting onto the show, just taking it up a notch?" But that has to happen. That has to happen.
Honestly, that Little John could use that or at least something to give him some character development. Well, on that note, well, thank you everybody for jumping on. It was great to hear everybody's thoughts. Really fun to just be able to talk about the show for a while. I guess we'll see what happens. It seems likely that they're going to get a second season. Like there's been just like a lot of talk. Will, you're more plugged into this than
Hmm.
I am.
It seems like it because they thinking of it from the PR perspective, about episode 7, 8, that's when the interviews that were clearly done, back in October, before the series release, all of the press was coming out saying, producers talk second season. Jack Patton and Lauren McQueen talk about what they could do in the second season. And so they were very specifically timed to come out a little bit later on. So they're clearly trying to generate some noise. But there's also the thing of, well, Billy the Kid, which is MGM Plus's big, tentpole show, just finished. I saw also that they have commissioned a Magnificent Seven TV show.
Hmm.
And I imagine the commissioning of the Magnificent Seven TV show would be just in case Robin Hood season 2 doesn't take off the way they want it to. They have another new show, but that's another year away. So all of the things are set, I think, for them getting a second season. I'd be very surprised, given what's happening in the sort of public eye when, again, from the PR perspective, if it doesn't get a second season. But especially as, again, the reviews, we've been critical in that sense of we love it, so we're picking it apart. But the reviews have been very, very good. And from the public as well, not necessarily just from critics. From the public, it's been very positive. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if a second season isn't coming.
Yeah, I've got the IMDb page pulled up, and they already have a listing for season 2, episode 1, which somehow already has 17 reviews. Not sure exactly how that works. Doesn't indicate well the reliability of it all. Let's see, its average rating on IMDb is 6.7 out of 10, which puts it close and around that original rating of 7 out of 10 that we gave it before. I think my personal rating, like Emily's, has dropped, maybe not quite as low, but I can see how the general review aggregate would go around that area. All right. Well, thanks so much. Maybe we'll all reconvene to talk about the Death of Robin Hood movie.
Gonna be a
Hope
big
so.
year.
This show was,
Yeah.
in comparison to how that one looks, probably the bright spot in terms of happy, jolly Robin Hood.
We have to go
Yeah.
forward like a arrow on a bowstring. We have to go backwards before we can go forwards.
I'm still
That
holding
is
out
some.
hope that they've got Hugh Jackman. They'll drop the trailer, and we'll find out the movie's a goddamn musical.
I'm dying.
All right.
That is something I do love about our Discord, though. Is like part of the reason I was watching the show was for us. Obviously, it was Robin Hood content. I'm gonna watch it, but I was also excited to talk with y'all about and like certain things that happened. Like maybe a scene with Marion. I immediately in the Discord was like, "Oh, what did Emily say about this? I must know." Like, I really love our Discord, and I'm very thankful for all of you who helped me come to sense of what's happening with these shows and Robin Hood content. So yeah, I feel like we're my favorite water cooler for this type of show. And I wonder like what are like Game of Thrones was such a water cooler show that everyone talked about. I do wonder who else is talking about this show. We all have each other, which is great. But yeah, is there a wider fan base? I don't know.
There seems to be a pretty active sub like Reddit page, which is interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, the only social media I regularly use, other than I suppose Discord, is Tumblr, and I haven't seen much movement on there. But maybe it's just not capturing that specific sort of subgroup that tends to use that site.
Hmm.
I like the Discord to chat about this show because I don't have the historical knowledge that a lot of you will have. So I watched the first two episodes and I was like, huh, crazy. I didn't realize that the Christianity came to England so late. That's wild. Huh. And then I opened Discord and I'm like, oh, it didn't. Crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. That was yeah. I just got off a binge of The Last Kingdom, in which England is a very Christian country already. So yeah, it was yeah, that was still I'm sure you guys already talked about all that, but yeah. Religion stuff was a little strange.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot in our review of the first two episodes.
Yeah,
And then
yeah,
we talked about it less now because it became less a part of the show. It was such a
yeah,
huge part of the first two episodes, and then it was
right.
basically nothing.
And Gotta too, like whatever. I thought we'd at least get something, the finale, some big she's gonna, do something or show Robin something. Guess not.
Oh.
I really wonder about the actress who played Gata, what she thought when she found out that well, your job will be to be nude and look ethereal, and
Yeah.
that will be your role in various forest scenes. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully she got well paid, and that was the main thing she was
I
looking
hope
for.
so.
And that they had
Yeah.
a coat ready to go as soon as they yelled cut.
Yeah.
I hope so.
Would have gotten chilly.
We're rooting for you, MGM, please.
Okay. Well, have a great night, Alex. Have a great night, Martia. Have a great afternoon, early evening, Emily and Mike. And have a great morning, Will.
Have good
Bye.
ones.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be,
Yeah.
be
Thank you.
merry anyway.
Be merry anyway. Take care, everyone.